How can Jimmy Kimmel live with him? Like, Jimmy Kimmel is a talented guy, and I don't think he's like an evil person or something, but he's made this deal where he just serves power and attacks anybody who challenges power. Like, how can, honestly, how can he look in the mirror and say, I'm doing something honorable? Like, how can he live with himself? How can his wife sleep with him?
Well, it'd be...
I mean
it'd be one thing,
Imagine, if you will, Tucker Carlson, the lord of primetime provocation, not confined to his usual Fox News domain, but storming, uninvited, onto the brightly lit set of Jimmy Kimmel's late-night talk show. Picture him contemptuously flipping Kimmel's carefully prepared cue cards, transforming the expected cascade of gentle late-night giggles into a brutal, unforgiving gladiator arena, filled not with lions, but with withering eye rolls and palpable chaos. That, in essence, is the energy, the sheer audacity of the takedown we're about to dissect. What precisely turned Jimmy Kimmel, the affable purveyor of celebrity interviews and lighthearted political jabs, from the confident joke teller into the unwitting and very public butt of Tucker Carlson's elaborate, scathing, and undeniably memorable critique? This isn't just a typical media spat. This is a full-blown late-night demolition, a meltdown juicier and more revealing than an accidentally leaked group chat from CNN's annual Christmas party.
each other equally is joking about each other indiscriminately. So yeah, I think comedians who, and this is why so much of comedy is not funny today. It's my chief criticism of like late night comedy, which I find unwatchable. I think it's totally unwatchable.
But also contemptible. I mean, they're collaborators.
They're just like the fact checkers. They're guardians of the narrative. You know, they are.
There was Tucker Carlson, captured in his natural habitat, eyes blazing with that familiar intensity. A look that a suburban dad might reserve for discovering kale surreptitiously hidden within his otherwise perfectly good burger. He was firing off one of his now patented monologues, a masterclass in that unique Carlson blend of righteous indignation, feigned bewilderment, and the slightly manic energy of a confused substitute teacher who has completely lost control of the classroom. And who, you might ask, was unfortunate enough to find themselves firmly planted in his crosshairs this time? Was it ISIS, the ever-elusive deep state, or perhaps Hunter Biden's laptop, cleverly disguised and making a surprise guest appearance? Nope. The real, terrifying apex predator lurking in Tucker Carlson's personal Jurassic Park of perceived societal threats was none other than Jimmy Kimmel.
If his job wasn't to be a comedian and to do that, but his job is to be he's supposed to be funny, and comedians are supposed to hold people in positions of power accountable.
Yeah, the people in charge.
Exactly.
He's their Praetorian Guard.
Yeah.
And it's like the self-hatred he must feel, because he wasn't always, that's my point. Yeah. I mean, Colbert has always been a hard partisan, talented guy, but obviously he's not a comedian. But Kimmel was a comedian. Like, how does he, I don't understand.
I don't know
how he can sleep.
He might buy into the narrative to the extent that he thinks it's morally wrong to joke about these certain topics.
But it's not just that, he's like pouring hot oil on the peasants from the parapet.
This wasn't a debate about specific policy points, nor was it a nuanced critique of Kimmel's comedic timing or joke construction. No, Tucker Carlson performed what can only be described as a televised cultural autopsy on Jimmy Kimmel himself. He didn't engage with Kimmel's jokes or arguments. He systematically, and with undisguised disdain, dismantled the entire persona. The polished, mainstream-approved, network-sanctioned host who makes an estimated $15 million a year by poking relatively safe, establishment-friendly fun at carefully selected political targets. It was less a critique of content, more a rhetorical vivisection of character, or at least the carefully constructed, public-facing version of it.
Even the quote, comedians, they were on propaganda duty too. Watch this.
He's also pushing U.S. intelligence to find evidence for this theory that the virus was accidentally released from a lab in Wuhan. That's his new angle to feed the wingnuts, to treat this virus like it was a conspiracy of some kind.
It should have never happened. This plague should never have happened. It could have been stopped. But people chose not to stop it.
What people? Tomorrow he'll blame the Spanish flu on Antonio Banderas.
Yeah. Imagine if you're a comedian and all of a sudden your cue card has all kinds of talking points from politicians and foreign governments on it. don't read it. You degrade yourself, and you become complicit in the greatest crime in history.
To Tucker, Jimmy Kimmel ceased to be an individual person and instead transformed, almost alchemically, into a potent archetype. The living, breathing embodiment of Hollywood's performative empathy. The veritable patron saint of safe, corporatized, and ultimately toothless sarcasm. He became, in Carlson's narrative, the poster child, the apex example, for an entire class of celebrities who preach piously from on high, lecturing the masses on morality and social justice, all while living lives of unimaginable, almost obscene privilege, hosting glitzy award shows in designer tuxedos, sipping on artisanal water flown in from remote Icelandic glaciers, and generally existing in a bubble of wealth and influence utterly detached from the realities faced by their viewers. This wasn't just about Kimmel anymore. It was about an entire class, an entire worldview that Tucker Carlson clearly, and very publicly, loves to skewer with undisguised relish.
The job description of a comedian is not so different from the job description of a journalist, as traditionally constituted. Tell the truth about the powerful. Comedians are usually a lot smarter, more clever, and incisive than journalists, but that's what they're supposed to be doing. Almost none still do. Adam Carolla is one of the very few remaining comedians in the United States. He's out with a new book called Everything Reminds Me of Something.
Tucker then took his audience on a journey, a historical deep dive through Jimmy Kimmel's notable career evolution. He painted a picture of Kimmel's early days, co-hosting The Man Show, a program infamous for its celebration of lowbrow humor and segments featuring, among other things, women enthusiastically jumping on trampolines. He contrasted this earlier, arguably more irreverent persona with Kimmel's current iteration as America's bedtime preacher, a nightly purveyor of moralizing monologues delivered with a somber, almost funereal sincerity. This metamorphosis, in Carlson's scathing assessment, wasn't evidence of genuine personal growth or intellectual development. It was, he implied, nothing more than bad performance art, a calculated, cynical shift designed to align Kimmel with the prevailing and professionally advantageous Hollywood orthodoxies. Kimmel, Carlson suggested, was the human equivalent of a hybrid SUV, once obnoxiously loud and unapologetically brash, now piously pretending to save the world, all while still voraciously guzzling attention at an alarming and arguably unsustainable rate.
Kimmel is a talented guy, and I don't think he's like an evil person or something, but he just serves power and attacks anybody who challenges power. Like, how can, honestly, how can he look in the mirror and say, I'm doing something honorable? Like, how can he live with himself? How can his wife sleep with him?
Well, it's a power cattle.
Suck up
Yeah.
to the people in charge.
Exactly.
He's their Praetorian Guard.
Yeah.
And it's like, the self-hatred he must feel, because he wasn't always, that's my point. Yeah. I mean, Colbert has always been a hard partisan, talented guy, but obviously he's not a comedian. But Kimmel was a comedian. Like, how does he, I don't understand. Pouring hot oil on the peasants from the parapet. Right. Like, he's hurting anyone who challenges the king.
The core of Carlson's comedic critique, the central pillar of his argument, was that Jimmy Kimmel, in his quest for relevance and establishment approval, had fundamentally forgotten how to be funny. His nightly monologues, Tucker argued with a mixture of pity and contempt, had devolved into little more than TED Talks with a laugh track, where the jokes were less about eliciting genuine humor and more about delivering carefully crafted moral messages, often at the expense of conservative targets. Kimmel, the once unpredictable court jester, had, in Carlson's eyes, started acting like a stern, humorless court judge, pontificating from on high. And to Tucker, this transformation wasn't just disappointing. It was the ultimate comedic sin, a betrayal of the comedian's sacred duty, tantamount to cultural fraud. The revolution, Carlson quipped with characteristic dryness, will indeed be televised, and it will, in all likelihood, be sponsored by oat milk and accompanied by a trigger warning.
There are a lot of people who are like on your side because they're for free speech, who are not actually for free speech at all, who are pushing, a very specific foreign policy agenda, for example, and using another issue to lower your defenses and let themselves into your brain. And I think that's really sinister, really, really, really sinister. And it's becoming more obvious now. Like, if you're for free speech.
Crucially, and perhaps most strategically, Jimmy Kimmel offered no public response to Carlson's verbal onslaught. Not a single tweet, not a dismissive side-eye in his next monologue, not even a passive-aggressive aside about the importance of civility in public discourse. This silence, whether intentional or simply a result of being utterly blindsided, only served to magnify the impact of Tucker's salvo. It was, as one observer noted, like launching fireworks into a vacuum. The lack of any answering explosion only made Tucker's initial detonations seem louder, more impactful, more definitive. But this meticulously crafted takedown wasn't just about one late-night host, however prominent. Tucker Carlson, with a showman's flair, expertly used Jimmy Kimmel as a symbolic conduit, a convenient effigy, through which to launch a much broader, more sweeping attack on what he perceives as the spiritual bankruptcy of Hollywood's elite. He painted a picture of a media landscape where every laugh track is a lie detector, and every earnest moral pronouncement delivered by a wealthy celebrity is, in reality, just diet propaganda. A watered-down, palatable version of a pre-approved narrative. This, Tucker Carlson declared with a dramatic flourish, is the modern comedy Cold War. A bizarre, often surreal conflict where ideological battles are fought not with bullets and bombs, but with sarcastic monologues, viral clips, and carefully curated social media personas. Carlson's aim, it became increasingly clear, wasn't to engage in a good-faith debate with Jimmy Kimmel. It was to fundamentally redefine him, to permanently rebrand him in the eyes of his viewers, to make him the undisputed mascot, the living embodiment of elite out-of-touch hypocrisy. In this strange new media landscape, Carlson seemed to argue being perceived as unfunny, or even worse, unpopular, with a certain segment of the population, is a far more grievous offense than simply being incorrect on a matter of policy.
They mean nothing.
I agree. Wait until you hear about this guy named Tucker Carlson. You are gonna hate him.
The undeniably big topics, the ones that will define our future, get virtually no discussion at all. War, civil liberties, emerging science, demographic change, corporate power, natural resources.
Right. The big topics, the important subjects like these.
Well, it turns out leprechauns exist not just on cereal boxes. There are a lot of people who believe they have seen a leprechaun.
In Carlson's elaborately constructed world, every laugh track emanating from a late-night studio is a carefully calibrated lie detector. And every earnest moral message delivered by a millionaire comic is nothing more than thinly veiled, easily digestible diet propaganda. He doesn't necessarily see figures like Kimmel as inherently dangerous in a political sense. Rather, he sees them as predictable, as cogs in a larger machine of cultural conformity. And that predictability, that adherence to a safe, establishment-approved script, is, in the chaotic carnival of modern media, the ultimate, unforgivable sin. Because if the punchline is obvious, if the message is telegraphed, then the joke, Carlson implies, is ultimately on us, the unsuspecting audience. Let's not, however, pretend that Tucker Carlson is some neutral, objective referee in this slapstick morality play, impartially calling balls and strikes from the sidelines. He's not merely the guy dispassionately watching the circus unfold. He's the one enthusiastically selling popcorn to the eager crowd, all while simultaneously and very loudly heckling the clowns performing in the center ring. But that, in many ways, is the peculiar genius of his approach. He masterfully gets to wear the convincing mask of the outsider, the rebellious truth-teller, while simultaneously, and very effectively, building his own formidable tent right next to the very freak show he so gleefully, and so profitably, mocks. He doesn't target Kimmel to engage in a genuine debate with him. He targets him to define him, to freeze him in place like a taxidermied punchline, a carefully preserved relic of a bygone era when comedy still possessed the courage, the audacity, to offend everyone equally, not just the people who happen to shop at Target or vote a certain way. As the segment relentlessly steamrolled on, you could almost visualize the gears grinding and turning within Tucker's ever-active mind. This guy, he seemed to be thinking, desperately wants to be the next Jon Stewart, a revered voice of satirical reason, but he ends up sounding more like a perpetually guilt-tripping aunt who relentlessly forwards debunked chain emails about the dangers of recycling and the healing powers of crystals. And that unflattering image, Kimmel as the awkward, overly earnest moralist at the family Thanksgiving table, the one everyone tries to avoid making eye contact with, became the unspoken yet powerfully resonant metaphor for the entire monologue. It was, in the final analysis, less about the intricacies of politics and far more about the crushing weight of an unbearable, almost suffocating tone.
It's crazy. It's upside down. The comedians should be poking holes in the popular narrative, not propping it up.
Jimmy Kimmel is. Like, truly. No, I mean it.
You said it,
no
not me.
No amount of money is worth what he's doing, in my opinion.
Yeah, but it's how they control speech and thought. It's how if your worldview is incoherent and impossible to defend rationally,
yes,
then you have to insulate it from criticism. And what's the most effective kind of criticism there is? I think it's mockery, which exposes foolishness for what it is.
Tucker unapologetically and with considerable theatricality went after the performative sincerity, the overly choreographed concern, the almost palpable sense of self-importance that he argues has come to define much of late-night comedy. He lamented the way the genre has shifted, in his view, from being a source of biting satire and irreverent social commentary to becoming little more than a platform for moral handholding, a safe space where pre-approved narratives are gently reinforced and uncomfortable truths are conveniently ignored. Carlson sees this evolution not as progress, as a sign of comedy's growing social conscience, but as a profound regression, a cowardly retreat, all dressed up in flattering studio lighting and accompanied by a canned laugh track. And then, of course, there's the audience. Not Kimmel's, but Tucker's. They didn't tune in expecting a point-by-point, evidence-based rebuttal of Kimmel's latest monologue. They weren't seeking nuance or balanced perspective. They just needed a villain, a recognizable face to pin the pervasive, free-floating sense of hypocrisy and frustration on. In this particular psychodrama, Jimmy Kimmel became the designated piñata, the unfortunate recipient of every pent-up resentment viewers felt after being lectured on morality by someone who makes more money in a single week than they are likely to see in an entire year. Tucker Carlson's audience, it's fair to say, doesn't crave nuance. They crave demolition, and on this night, Tucker delivered it in spades. We've officially, and perhaps irrevocably, entered the era of the comedy Cold War, a bizarre new battleground where the front lines are drawn not in muddy trenches or along ideological divides, but across glaring YouTube thumbnails and endlessly trending Twitter hashtags. It's no longer sufficient to simply be funny or even particularly well-informed. Now, it seems you've got to be performatively furious, passionately outraged, or at the very least, ironically enlightened, preferably while bathed in flattering makeup under expensive stage lights. Tucker Carlson and Jimmy Kimmel, in this strange new paradigm, have become the most unlikely, and perhaps unwilling, warlords in this absurd, ongoing conflict, flinging smug, carefully crafted monologues at each other from opposite ends of a media battlefield that increasingly resembles a bloated, incoherent mashup of The Daily Show and a mid-level think tank's poorly designed PowerPoint presentation.
So it makes perfect sense to me. I honestly, I was mistaken about this. It's something I admit I was wrong about, is when early on when we first started getting fact-checked and we first started having these issues with censorship with the Babylon Bee, it was my belief that humor, these were humorless scolds who just didn't think our jokes were funny, and they thought they were offensive and they were being hypersensitive. And that's not the case.
No, it's not. You're going through the stages of realization.
The stages of realization. I eventually learned and came to realize that it's not humor. Humor's a vehicle for truth delivery. They don't like the fact that the narrative is being challenged in a way that's effective, and so they have to shut you up.
Carlson isn't merely battling Kimmel for nightly ratings. He's engaged in a far more significant, more existential battle for dominance in a rapidly collapsing media ecosystem. A world where nobody seems to trust objective facts anymore. But everybody, absolutely everybody, loves a good savage dunk. He doesn't bring statistics or meticulously compiled spreadsheets to this particular fight. He brings gift-worthy eye rolls, pregnant pauses, and metaphors so melodramatic, so over the top, they could easily double as angsty emo song lyrics from the early 2000s. He's not just trying to make Jimmy Kimmel look wrong, to expose the flaws in his arguments. He's trying with every fiber of his being to make him look uncool. And let's be brutally honest, in the year 2025, being perceived as uncool is, for many public figures, a fate far worse than simply being incorrect. It's practically terminal. Jimmy Kimmel, meanwhile, isn't even playing the same game anymore. Or if he is, he's playing by a completely outdated set of rules. He seems to be still stuck in a version of reality, a bygone era, where the studio audience politely, almost reflexively, claps after a soft, predictable jab at a politician's unfortunate haircut. But Tucker Carlson operates like a man whose green room doubles as a heavily fortified war bunker. His every utterance a carefully calculated strategic move. His mission isn't to refute Kimmel's points. It's to rebrand him, to permanently transform a guy known primarily for hosting a lighthearted celebrity Halloween candy segment into the unwilling, unwitting mascot for elite, out-of-touch liberal hypocrisy. Kimmel doesn't even need to show up for the battle. Carlson just Photoshop lariats his way through the prevailing narrative, and the internet, in its insatiable hunger for conflict and drama, eagerly eats it up like it's the last lonely French fry at a Super Bowl party. And that, perhaps, is the real, unspoken kicker here. Tucker Carlson isn't even destroying Jimmy Kimmel with the sheer weight of substance, with an undeniable barrage of irrefutable facts. He annihilates him with chilling effectiveness, purely through presentation, through the masterful manipulation of tone and perception. It's like winning a complex chess match not by outmaneuvering your opponent, but by dramatically setting the entire board on fire and triumphantly yelling, "Checkmate," while your bewildered opponent is still trying to figure out where all the pawns are supposed to go. He has, with remarkable success, transformed Jimmy Kimmel into a living, breathing meme, a walking eye-roll generator for his legions of viewers, who now, it's safe to say, can't see Jimmy Kimmel on their television screens without hearing imaginary, mocking laugh tracks superimposed over what they perceive to be taxpayer-funded tantrums. Which leads us, inevitably, to the punchline that somehow, inexplicably, became the pundit. How did we even get here? How did a guy once famous for his gleeful, often juvenile mockery of pretentious bow ties become the self-appointed, highly influential voice of the anti-Hollywood, anti-establishment brigade? And conversely, how did the amiable, generally uncontroversial host of a mainstream network comedy show end up symbolizing the very thing, the very elitist hypocrisy he once, at least ostensibly, mocked? It's like watching a surreal dystopian circus where the clowns have started authoritatively writing foreign policy white papers, and the distinguished ringmasters are now doing awkward 5-minute stand-up sets on the intricacies of late-stage economic collapse. So now, we are left to ask the only question that truly seems to be left worth asking in this glitter-covered, increasingly bizarre gladiator match of inflated egos and meticulously ego-driven scripts. In a world where professional comedians are earnestly delivering foreign policy hot takes, and cable news hosts are, with alarming frequency, auditioning for open mic night at the local comedy club, who exactly is running the show? Better yet, is anyone actually running it at all? Or are we, the bewildered, popcorn-clutching audience, just passively watching two overpaid, overly confident teleprompters trying, with varying degrees of success, to out-parody each other on national television, while America collectively live-streams the ensuing chaos with a mixture of horror, amusement, and absolutely zero intention of meaningful follow-through? Tucker Carlson certainly provided his version of an answer, a glorious, slow-motion implosion of a man who, in his view, forgot how to be genuinely funny, desperately tried to become politically important, and somehow, in the end, ended up being neither. It was less of a traditional takedown and more of a carefully orchestrated cultural intervention, hosted by a guy who seems to believe that smugness is not just a personality trait, but a vital, life-sustaining vitamin. In the end, Tucker Carlson didn't even need Jimmy Kimmel to reply. The resounding silence from Kimmel's camp was, in its own strange way, a form of laugh track, an unspoken acknowledgement of the hit. It created the powerful illusion of total, unassailable dominance. One man, in a well-fitting blazer, single-handedly taking down the entrenched empire of late-night comedy, one perfectly timed, withering eye roll at a time. Whether or not any of it is objectively true, in the grand theater of the absurd that is modern media, hardly even matters anymore. Perception, it seems, is the only currency left that truly holds any value. So there you have it. Tucker Carlson didn't destroy Jimmy Kimmel with an avalanche of facts or a torrent of fury. He did it with a potent cocktail of mockery, unwavering eye contact, and the quiet, unnerving confidence of someone who has, in all likelihood, never once made a TikTok dance. It wasn't just a hit piece. It was a meticulously crafted piece of performance art. And for once, the punchline didn't even need to be particularly funny to land with devastating impact. It just needed to hurt.